the other side that is providing the new services to all those new people moving into their area, they think they ought to change it.
Well, you're exactly right. We had, basically no change, and everybody just walked in, and I said, what's everybody want? And they said, just leave it the same. And so it was pretty simple for us, but I can understand with all the larger counties that have a lot more at stake, it's easier for us on something like that.
Yeah.
Well, Clint, we've had a lot of growth. We satisfied I was released, and I think everybody's happy with it now. And that because we give it all to the school board. Everybody gets a share and share accordingly.
We have 8 jurisdictions in the state that all the lost money goes to the school board, so there is no negotiation.
They have to roll that.
That would be another way to handle it, but how many of y'all in this room that have lost want to give it up to the school boards?
Yeah, really.
Well, after you get used to it, it's all right.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to other issues. The first one is dealing with hotel motel tax accountability. The issue that came up from a county, they were wondering why the marketing dollars that come out of your hotel motel tax, that most of you give it to a Convention and Visitors Bureau or the Chamber of Commerce or some entity, nonprofit entity, to do the marketing for tourism development. The law requires that now. You can't keep it and do your own marketing in-house. This particular county raised the point, why can't we do it in-house? We do not like the fact that we turn this money over to a nonprofit, but we're still liable for it. So if they misspend the funds, then there could be liability back on us for them misspending the funds. And so this particular county wanted to change the law so they could basically do their own tourism marketing. I guess a staff person on county staff doing that. I'll open it up to you all. What do y'all think about the current system? Are you concerned about liability that you may have by turning these dollars over to a nonprofit? Is anybody doing it differently? What are your thoughts about the current hotel motel tax system for the house? I'm not talking about the proceeds that go into your general fund for general services, but the part that goes to marketing.
My major concern is collecting it. Who's going to spend it? Because I got a feeling a lot of it is falling through the cracks right now because
You're not auditing it?
You're strictly at the discretion of the hotels and motels to be able to report it accurately.
Yeah, y'all can audit, but I bet most people don't audit.
It's too expensive.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any thoughts?
I think I would like to have the option to do that rather than be compelled to hand it over to some nonprofit, whether it be the chamber or Visitors Bureau or whoever. It might not work for everybody, but you ought to have the option.
We require receipts on everything. Show us where it's been used and not just used for something else.
Have you ever had a problem with misuse and trying to get them to correct it?
No, I think we had a talk with our auditors and they suggested at least that as a number.
Getting the receipts they suggested? Anybody else? What is your thoughts about putting together a draft statement to look at on that? Do y'all want to do that, or it's up to y'all?
If you do that, do you want to include in that too, trying to change distribution from state-owned parks with lodges?
Explain that, the distribution from the state parks.
Well, if we got a state park, it's got a lodge on it, and state law now says that 100% of that comes into the county. I guess 50% goes back to the state, and then you divide up the other, however you divide the rest of it.
So you like to get 100% of it? Is that?
Well, it makes it simpler.
They get out of our report.
And then you have to spend a certain percent of that, then advertise in the state park. So.
I think the development authority in the county as far as percentage and stuff.
And maybe we don't need to touch that. Maybe that's good. I don't know. I just thought I'd bring that up while I was bringing that up.
We have a state park. I need to do a little more due diligence on how that's collected.
Okay.
And that might be even more important now that a lot of that is privatized. So if it's privatized, then, let them do their own advertising.
Does the state run the lodge?
No,
They
it's privatized.
privatized operations, they own the facility. Anybody else have any thoughts on hotel motel tax? Do we need to look into that some more?
We have the same problem that Tommy does. You know, my question's been all the time, are we getting what we need because it's a volunteer thing? And number two,
75% of it, we lucky.
right now, we got a case going to court trying to collect what they even reported, so.
Well, I'll put something together for y'all to look at. I guess it doesn't hurt to
Yeah.
put something together to look at at the next meeting and do a little more research on it. Okay, the last item under other issues,
Before you go to the next thing,
Can
this
we
gentleman
talk
here
about
had a question
SPOS
about
just for a
SPOS
second?
maintenance.
sure, we go ahead. We're going to get to that, but go ahead.
Well, my question was, you know, being able to use SPOS money on maintenance of SPOS projects. And I'd like a little bit more. I know you're going, you say you are proposing 15% to be used.
Right, this has been an issue that I know this committee has addressed for a number of years now. I believe it was either last year or the year before this committee raised it. We were at 10%, and then we raised it to 15%. So the proposal that's currently in the policy platform is to allow up to 15% of your SPOS funds to be set aside for maintenance and operation on projects that were constructed using SPOS funds. Jan Tankersley, who's a representative in the House, she's a former president of this organization. She actually introduced that bill last year. It did get discussion. It got very little support from any of the leadership in doing that. But that being said, we obviously, it's in our platform. We can continue to come up back and ask for that. There's a concern up there that if you ever crack the door and allow it to be used for things other than capital, that you'll never get it back for capital. I'm just repeating the concern from some of the members of the General Assembly. They're very nervous about even opening the door for you all to use some of that for operations.
Well, I'm not talking about operation.
Well,
I'm just talking about
maintenance. Well, you can do some maintenance now. There's really, that's kind of a gray area in the SPOS law. What is capital versus maintenance? If you have to replace a roof, some people may say, well, replacing that roof is maintenance. But others say, no, that's capital. Replacing a roof is a capital expenditure. It's got a useful life of a number of years, and it crosses a certain threshold from a cost standpoint, and that is clearly capital. Some people think that replacing their patrol cars is really maintenance, like a Cobb County that replaces a number of cars every single year. That sort of falls in their operating account. But a rural county that may go 5 or 6 years without replacing a patrol car and then all of a sudden have to replace patrol cars, they could very much consider that capital equipment. So it gets into the definition of what's maintenance and what's capital. And right now, there's not a lot of agreement on where that line is.
But when you do a splash vote, the voters vote on specific projects. So if you take some of that money to replace a roof on a project that's not on that list, aren't you violating that law?
Well, you can't do that,
We
but
wasn't talking about that, just the ones that are built with SPOS money. For instance, if I have,
On that
if
referendum.
I spend $1 million on a building, and then a chiller is out of warranty and the chiller goes out and it's $56,000, you know, to take a hit in your general fund, which you got a $8.4 million budget with $200,000 worth of contingency, if you have to take that $56,000, that chiller out of that, you've taken a big hit.
sure.
And if you have to replace, now what if you have to replace 2 or 3 police cars every year? We bought 9 last year, and we got to buy 2 more this year. But, you know, what if you have 2 police cars and a chiller and something else go out, it's gonna kill him if you're a little county. Now, if you're a big county, like some of these big boys around here, they got a $100 million budget, that's no big deal. But when you're sitting on a ham sandwich starving to death down here in the southeast, you need some help.
We've got our tax attorney hiding behind the post over here, but I think that there is, a lot of the county attorneys will say that replacing that chiller is a capital item, and you can do that under current law. Joe, do you want to comment on what's the difference between capital and maintenance? I mean, obviously painting a building's probably more maintenance, but
I mean,
even,
I think the answer is about as clear as the discussion has gone so far. There's no real unanimity of opinion of what is, where exactly reach that line between what is an actual out-and-out capital expenditure versus what should properly fall under the M&O column.
Well, if that building's built with SPOS money, that was my point.
Right.
Then, if you've got a maintenance cost, and you could set a threshold on it, you could say a roof or chiller or, you know, whatever. It has to be something big. It's not regular day-to-day maintenance like the cleaning up of the restrooms, the painting and that kind of stuff. This is a major replacement. If you replace a roof, that's big bucks.
Sure.
But was it in your SPOS to begin with?
Right.
Or is it in your next SPOS? Are you trying to replace it in the same SPOS that you did, or is it the next round of SPOS?
No, it's something that we built with a past product.
All right. And when you
I
put it
don't
on the
think you did
ballot,
that.
did you say, not maintenance, but capital improvements, buildings, building projects, something?
Well, you know, when on some of those, they specify, we're gonna build this type of building, or we're gonna renovate, an old school and make it a courthouse type thing, or whatever. There's several different scenarios, cause I know
There's
y'all
a way
are.
you can do it, but you gotta give yourself some wiggle room.
I-
You need to be clear that it's gonna be capital projects. That
Right.
you don't, that if you get so specific that we're gonna redo this particular building, then you got no wiggle room for what happens in that 6-year period of your SPOS.
let me see if I can sum this up, because I think this is what you're getting at, Paul. Really what you would like is on a future SPOS referendum to say, we want to set aside up to X% of the new SPOS revenues in an account that we can use for capital repair. For anything that may occur on any project that we previously have constructed with SPOS, because you don't know when that chiller is going to go out. You don't know when you're going to need the new roof necessarily, because a lot of times things don't happen on a set schedule. You'd like for them to happen, but you could have a hurricane or a tornado come through there and blow the roof off. And so what you're really asking for is not really even maintenance, but you're really looking at capital repair money that you can use on previously constructed SPOS projects that come up unexpectedly.
I think repair is probably the key word. I think you hit on that. That's
But
an
you'd have-
excellent way to put it.
You'd have to do it on the new splash.
Yeah.
Well, you'd have to
Yeah.
get
The
approved.
current
Yeah.
SPOS that I have an item that says government building upgrades and renovations. And it was approved by, so I can choose any government building I want, you chiller into our whole courthouse.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't built with SPOS
That's
money?
something you can still do without being,
Because the voters
call out and
approved
show you
that.
how to do it.
Well, we can look at that. Kevin's pushing the envelope there. But
I know.
Call out and show you, we show you how to
Big,
do
we're
it.
being recorded, don't forget that.
yeah, you could say government improvements, and you can basically do anything under the sun you want with the money.
Government building.
Government building,
Yep.
government
Well,
building.
still, that allows, that's very broad. That's very broad.
Yeah.
That's between him and his post.
Of course, I've seen some counties that have said for economic development purposes, and I could probably label everything you do under an economic development purpose.
I looked at the last 4 minutes be struck from this video.
It's the danger of televising these things.
So we just passed ours for the
They
next
can't
6
see you.
years, so we don't have that opportunity to change that verbiage for
Right.
6 more years. But if they could change that where they could use that word repair in there.
But it,
I'll-
like you said,
I'll
it's
look
going to
at-
have to be on the next SPOS.
Yeah, you'd have
You
to
can't
prove it in a
amend the
referendum.
current SPOS.
You can't grandfather it back into it.
All
No.
right. How about a grandfather clause?
No.
You can't do that.
We'll
Don't
look
go there.
at, we'll look at the SPOS statement and see if we can look at a proposed statement to do what Kevin's already doing.
Clint, didn't school board get that in this past legislature?
Did what?
Didn't school board get that in this last session?
No.
He
It
lost
should
it.
is.
That failed.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to move on. We're running out of time here. The last item on this list was dealing with credit unions. So we had a county that was asking us why credit unions were not subject to your financial institutions tax that banks are subject to. And they thought that the credit unions obviously have changed over time. They're not what they once were. It's pretty easy to be a member of a credit union today. In fact, everybody in this room, by being a member of ACCG, is eligible to be a member of the credit union that we have a relationship with. So the theory is, since credit unions have changed, it's so easy to become a member of a credit union, is there really a need to continue to give them this advantage over the banks where they don't have to pay the financial institutions tax? And should we ask for credit unions to be subject to the financial institutions tax? Sean's done a little research on this. I understand there's different ways you can create credit unions. Some are state chartered, some are federally chartered, some are chartered by both at the same time. So there may be an issue with trying to get authority from the General Assembly to tax federally chartered credit unions, because we may be preempted by federal law in doing that. So if we are preempted by federal law from taxing the federally created credit unions, even if we change state law, do we not then set up two systems within the credit union community, some that we apply our financial institutions tax to and some that we can't? So what is your thinking on this topic? Is this something you all want to look at and potentially pursue? Again, we're talking about applying your financial institutions tax to credit unions, which you currently do not do. And that would change it, it requires state law change, and even if we change state law, you could probably only get at the state chartered credit unions. You couldn't probably tax the federally chartered credit unions.
So, most of them
All it's
are
gonna do is make them go
nonprofits,
up on their
NGOs,
rates.
teacher credit unions,
To the consumer.
firemen's, police. I'm not personally a fan of those,
Not a fan of
taxing.
the credit unions? Okay.
I think
Saying
it's,
they're nonprofit is a misnomer.
Right, some are.
Most of them are. All of them are. If you're not making a profit, you're out of business. But I'm gonna tell you how much traction this is gonna get. You go to the FDIC, walk in the door, the first door on the right is credit union.
Well, it would definitely be difficult to try to change federal law. I think
Yeah.
this county was wanting to just change state law, but I think the point, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, the point is if we change state law, we may only get a portion of them. We're not gonna get all of them.
The only thing we could do would be impact the state chartered credit union, which if you look at the sheet right now, out of the 138, only 54 are state chartered. The rest are federally chartered. We won't be able to grab those from financial institution status standpoint.
Without us going and changing federal law also.
Wasting your time.
Anybody, I don't see anybody support us?
My personal
Pursuing
opinion,
this,
I
or-
think if we got better things to do than try to fight that battle.
Okay,
I don't think you're gonna win anyway.
okay.
I think the federal government, didn't it, Sean, the federal government will have to do this on a federal basis this past year and committee?
They might have, I mean, what I have is the Federal Credit Union Act is still on the books, but the problem is there might be two acts on the federal level. There's a Credit Union Act that prevents them from being taxed, but there's also, if they are nonprofits, they fall under that federal law as well with regard to corporate taxation. Where you can't, where nonprofits are exempt from corporate taxation. There's an argument to be made that financial institutions taxes could be considered a corporate tax. But even if the feds did away with the federal law, and we do have state laws set up right now, if the feds change their minds up there, it'll automatically adjust at the state level. The code that we have that I decided for you on that one paper there shows you what the General Assembly is. If the feds do change their mind, there's automatically an adjustment at the state level to how credit unions are taxed with regard to, or how the formula applies to credit unions with regard to financial institutions tax. So it would not take a separate state law to do that.
The reason I ask is that our credit union sent a, letter to us asking us to oppose the federal legislation, so if they're doing it at that level, I'm sure they'll get state level too. So I agree with, Chairman, that it's probably not a good route to pursue.
Well, let's move on, if you will, pull out the revenue and finance policy platform. Obviously, we're not going to have time to go through this like the General County Government Committee went through each one statement by statement. So we're going to go through it by section, and I'm going to point out a few things that I think this committee needs to look at between now and the next meeting, but also give you all another chance to raise any issues that you want raised. The first section of this deals with property taxes, ad valorem taxes. On the second page, I've highlighted a statement that's been in our policy platform for probably 10, 15 years. It's been in there a long, long time. And it deals with state assistance with ad valorem tax collections. I'm wondering if we shouldn't modify this. This is kind of specific to money that they give us for certain forms and training and things of that nature, which this stuff hasn't been changed in many, many years. But one thing I do think we have to be concerned about as the state gets out of the business of collecting ad valorem taxes, as you know, the quarter mill is going away. So in another couple of years, there will not be any state ad valorem taxes in Georgia. What does that do to their support to the part of the Department of Revenue that trains your assessors, your tax commissioners, all these other things that they do on your behalf? Do you not start getting legislators in the appropriations process that are wanting to significantly cut that part of the state budget because they say, that's a local issue now. We don't collect ad valorem taxes. Let the locals deal with it. And as you know, if we don't have the Department of Revenue involved in providing uniform training and uniform forms and other things across the state, we're going to wind up with a mess. Because I promise you, over time, every county will be doing it differently. We'll have some counties that will do a lot of training and some counties that will do virtually no training. And so there's a real concern as the state gets out of the property tax collection business for themselves, not getting out of the property tax business altogether and not helping assist the local governments on this topic. So that's really not specifically addressed in this statement, but the thinking is maybe this statement needs to be modified to specifically talk about the state's role after they get out of the business of collecting state property taxes. What should their role continue to be with supporting the property tax system in the state? Any thoughts on that?
I think you're right. I think training and forms would be nice if they were consistent across the state.
Steve?
Clint, there was some